Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, over on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Well, the draft lottery, it happened. Detroit Pistons fans are sad. San Antonio Spurs fans, celebration. Yet again, the Spurs get the generational, or what we expect to be generational big man in the draft, Victor Wembanyama. Come on down to San Antonio. We've got a lot to break down. Draft picks could be on the move. We're going to talk about James Harden's situation. We'll talk a little bit about Ty Lue, whether he's staying with the Clippers. Will Chris Paul stay with the Suns? Lots of stuff for us to get into on today's show. Keith, the draft lottery, the spectacle of it all on television, I still love it. I still love it. Even watching it while knowing that these results are already known. This isn't happening in real time. This happened like a half hour ago.
Yep.
It's still fun just watching it all get revealed in front of you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people it comes up every year like, why don't they just show us this live? And the reality is it would be awful. No one would want to watch it. Like, it would be so bad. Like, it would just be the worst TV product because it's just not good. Like it's pulling ping pong balls out, that going and finding and trying to match them to number combinations. Like, it would just be, there's literally thousands of these number combinations, and it would just be weird. I guess the other thing too, it would be so anticlimactic because they do the first pick, then the second pick, then the third pick, then the fourth pick. Like, we want to see it in the reverse order, right? So yeah, I think the way it is fine. I don't care about it being live, and it's everybody's like, well, then they can't rig it. They still could, like, if they wanted to. It's not rigged. Like, if they wanted to rig it, the Bulls or somebody would have won, and they would have put Wembanyama in one of the biggest cities in the in the league. Like, that's just the reality.
Not
yeah, but I love it. I'm with you. I love the draft lottery. It's crazy. So, Trevor, San Antonio Spurs, man, when they tank, do they do it right?
I got to say, I know you were all for Wembanyama to San Antonio. I was hoping he would not go to San Antonio. Part of it is just, though, my own Western Conference bias, where I'm like, good Lord, the West is such a mess already. I don't need anything else coming into the West. But here's how it all finished up. But again, I think he's obviously he's a great fit anywhere. But San Antonio becomes the big winner from the draft lottery. We get, so as you can see here, this is a tankathon. San Antonio moves up 2 spots. Charlotte moves up 2 spots to get the number 2 pick. Man, I was hoping for Charlotte when they were in the mix there. Portland moves up 2 spots. Houston down 2, and poor Detroit down
worst case scenario
spots. The worst case scenario for the Pistons. I had to text my buddy and say, man, this was the worst case scenario for the Pistons, and he just said, of course it is. Rough draw there. This was, as they were reading everything off, I kept waiting for something to change, because it went chalk for all the way up through 6. And then suddenly at 5, it changed. I was surprised how long it went chalk for.
Yeah, it was too. A lot of times, you get, especially when you get through those first like 4 or 5 teams. Like, we got to Dallas. That was kind of the first, like, well, I guess Chicago was the first real kind of inflection point of, all right, are they gonna keep their pick by jumping into the top 4? Then it was like, all right, nope, it's the Bulls, but it's going to the Magic. And then you get to Dallas at 10, and it's like, all right, Dallas kept their pick. Nobody jumped and pushed them back. So we kind of knew at that point. Then it was, the longer it goes, it's like, all right, one of these teams in that 6 to 10 range is gonna have jumped up, and nobody did. It really was just a shuffling within that top 5. And the Pistons, you had to in effect lose the lottery 4 times. Like, that's the way you look at it if you're a Pistons fan, right? We lost 4 times, right? We lost the first pick, the second pick, the third pick, and the fourth pick, and slid as far back as entirely possible in this draft. They had a 52% chance to stay in the top 4, and they finished at 5.
It didn't happen, man.
Crazy.
Did Detroit have the worst night in the draft?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, not even close, right? I mean, just anytime you fall that even a couple picks is bad, but 4, like that's just absolutely brutal. So I want to give you these stats on the Spurs
Mm-hmm.
if I can real quick. So the Spurs have, this sounds crazy, but they've only really tanked 3 times in the history of the franchise. First time they did it, they came away with David Robinson. That too, people have forgotten that was a very risky pick because David Robinson had to fulfill a 2-year
In the Navy.
commitment to the Navy.
Yeah.
And part of what happened was he continued to grow while he was in the Navy. I think he was, I want to say he was 6'7" when he entered the Naval Academy, because that's the tallest you were allowed to be there, which was a whole thing back then. I think those regulations have changed now. But so 6'7" joins, grew, I believe it's a 6'9". I think he finished out at like 6'11", and by the time he gets to San Antonio, he was like 7'1".
Yeah.
2 years later. So that was that. Then obviously we all know about 10 years later, David Robinson out with a back injury. Things are going so badly that Greg Popovich fired Brian Hill.
Whoop. Greg Popovich fired Brian Hill, and apparently Keith Smith just said that's it. I'm out on that. Somehow he fired himself from the stream there. Um, he's back and he's laughing. Keith, I was just saying that you were so fired up about Greg Popovich firing Brian Hill that you fired yourself from the show.
Yeah, and then I looked at Danielle and I'm like, I just closed the entire show like a moron. I was trying to close the window next to the recording window, and apparently I'm an idiot and doesn't know
I've
how to
never seen
work
somebody
it
so
too.
angry over Brian Hill. He's like,
I know,
Brian
right?
Hill. I'm out.
I was big Brian Hill guy back in 1996. But anyway, the point I was making, things are going so poorly. Greg Popovich fired Brian Hill, came down out of the front office, and basically said, I'm going to coach this mess. Like, I made this mess of a roster. I'm going to coach it. And he's still there coaching because he got Tim Duncan, right? They moved up in that lottery, you get Tim Duncan. Then you go all the way to last night. They haven't tanked the last 3 years. They've not been good. Let's be clear, but they've been in the play-in tournament. They've been in the mix a few times in the last couple of seasons, and they get Victor Wembanyama. The last 4 years of the San Antonio Spurs history, they've missed the playoffs. That matches the number of times total that the San Antonio Spurs had missed the playoffs in their entire franchise history leading up to that. So really 8 times they've missed the playoffs. And out of those 8 times, 3 of those seasons, they've come away with David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and now Victor Wembanyama. Like, just, that's the basketball gods, I guess, rewarding doing it the right way, right? Not backing into being a terrible team and all those things. Like, and not, to be fair, I mean, they weren't good this year, but
No.
They land the big prize, man. And now we all know, right? It's funny because I had somebody say, why does everybody assume that's who's going to get picked?
Everyone. Come on.
It's already done, man. Like we could start the draft at 2, right? Like there's literally, I don't think anything within reason. We talked about this, like which players would you trade for Wembanyama? But there's nothing within reason. The Spurs are going to get offered to move off that pick. So to your point of draft picks maybe on the move, right? If we're ready to move on to that, the draft kind of starts at Charlotte, right at 2. And we're already hearing maybe not Scoot Henderson. Maybe they go Brandon Miller.
Let's talk about that. So number 2, does Charlotte really, they already have LaMelo Ball, but you and I have both said that when you're drafting this high, there's no reason to draft for fit. You should be drafting for talent.
Yep.
But you have LaMelo Ball. So what do you do if you're Charlotte? Do you move back? I don't know.
My guess, I mean, Jonathan Givony put right in his mock draft that came out right after the lottery results. My guess just behind the scenes, he probably had like 14 versions written up or more of the way this could go, right? He probably had every, all right, if they land here, this is who they, right? Number 1 was easy. But if this team gets 2, they take Miller. If this team gets 2, they take Henderson. And then we work it from there. But he has Brandon Miller projected number 2. And he's not the only one. I've read a couple others who said, yeah, Brandon Miller's going to be in the mix because if you're Charlotte, your goal is get LaMelo Ball signed to a long-term rookie, probably designated rookie extension this summer. And he's not a great fit with Scoot Henderson. They play the same position. You're probably not going to be able to craft a great defense if you're starting those two in your backcourt. It's probably just going to be a little bit messy. So now all of a sudden, you're hearing Brandon Miller's in the mix there, and then maybe that's Scoot Henderson to Portland. And then it becomes, well, does Portland want him? Or do they say, yeah,
Or do
we'll
they
keep
trade
him and we'll trade Dame and now we'll start over with Scoot Henderson as our guy? Or do you say, nah, Dame's still our guy. Let's trade the third pick. Like, it's going to get crazy after Wembanyama, because I could see any one of these teams saying, nope, we're moving out of the pick. We don't want to be in this spot.
I definitely could too. And let's talk about Portland for a minute. And maybe this may be an oversimplification here, Keith, but I think, look, they got Wembanyama. They're keeping Wembanyama. They keep Dame. They move forward. I have a hard time imagining a scenario in which Portland exits this offseason with both Dame and whoever they pick at number 3, or whatever they do. And I think they either trade the pick and keep Dame, or they trade Dame and keep the pick. I don't see them keeping both of those things.
Yep, completely agree. We are in, to no one's shock, we are in lockstep on this. But I think it's almost kind of obvious, right? You can't, that makes no sense. There is not, yes, if Portland had landed at 1, you could say we keep Dame and we draft Wembanyama and here we go.
Yeah.
Right. We'll probably be pretty good right now, and then we're going to be fine post Dame years. Anything else doesn't really make sense for them. These guys are all going to take minimum probably 2 or 3 years to get to a level of being the running mate Dame needs to compete for a championship. And by that point, he's probably on the downside of, his remaining years. So I'm with you. I think, I would be stunned if they may make that pick, but then it may be, we find out, all right, they're selecting for Team X, right? That's trading for that pick or whatever it is. But yeah, I think we're really in a spot. Well, actually, I think they have to make the pick because they owe a protected pick. So it'll be one of those things where they could trade it after.
And we can still hear the day before or whatever what they're doing.
Just well in advance.
Yep. The guy will put on the wrong hat and we'll all do the dance around that, and and then it'll ultimately wind up done.
I wish they would change that rule. And that's not even a CBA thing. That's a like NBA like operations thing where it is day of the draft. Like that counts the same as making the selection. Because I get why we have the step-in rule and not being able to trade consecutive picks. I fully get that. But once we get to the day of the draft, like if I can trade it 2 hours from now officially because I've made the selection, why can't I just trade it now? Right. And then we don't get all these dumb pictures. And for the kids too, like, man, if I'm being selected by Portland, but I'm really going to Detroit.
You want a Detroit hat.
Yeah, I want the Detroit hat, right? And I don't want the Detroit hat 2 hours later.
Yep.
Like, give me my moment on stage with the commissioner, with the Detroit hat, and we go. But that's, we can spend time on that soapbox another day. But yeah, man, I really think all the way through after San Antonio, all the way through the lottery, I can see any one of those teams making trades, making packages of trades. I think we are going to have a draft where we may have a lot of movement up and down. We may see a lot of salaries moving around in this draft as well. Some of the things are obviously going to be things that are, the trade's agreed to, but can't be executed until we're in the new league year and those sorts of things. But I think we're going to see a ton of movement throughout this draft, because I think it's a pretty flat draft, and that tends to lead to eye of the beholder type picks. Like I really want to move up to get player X. Like let's get there. Like Oklahoma City a couple years ago, right? Or last year, I guess it was. We really want Ousmane Dieng. So we're going to package together a bunch of our stuff, move up, and we're going to get Ousmane Dieng. And that's, where we're kind of, I think we'll see a repeat of those kind of things, because I think all these teams are just in such weird, different places. Like Houston, if I'm getting James Harden, what the heck do I want the 4th pick for?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That was what I was going to get to next. I mean, look, if you're Houston, you kind of have to know. Yeah. Is James Harden coming or not? Because there's going to be a lot of movement on draft. Now, you could always pick somebody and trade them later. Now, once you sign them, though, you got to wait. What is it? 30 days, right?
30 days.
Once you sign a guy. Yep. So that can be a little bit of a wrinkle. So then do you draft the guy?
Not even, sorry to interrupt, but they're not even in a spot where it's like, we have to sign the guy to use his salary matching in a trade, like happened with Andrew Wiggins in the Kevin Love trade. They're not in that spot, right? Because they're in a spot where they've got almost $60 million in cap space, so they can kind of almost do what they need to. I guess we could get in a spot where they sign Harden, then need to sign the player at 4 and do it that way. But yeah, I find it much like Dame and 3. I find it very hard to believe that it's going to be Harden and 4 on the
Yeah.
Rockets roster. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
No, no, it doesn't at all. And by the way, there's a story out right now that NBA GMs are considering two different things. One, making the draft a 2-day event, and I think about the NFL draft being like a 3-day thing,
Yeah.
considering making it a 2-day event, and in particular because the second round gets messy because second round picks get traded so many. I mean, by the time somebody makes the
Yeah.
pick, it's changed hands like
Yeah.
6 times.
Yeah.
And so that can be difficult. And you have what 2 minutes on the clock in the second round. That
Yeah.
gives you very, very little time to do anything.
Nikola Jokic gets drafted during a Taco Bell commercial.
Right. Yeah,
Right. They're
exactly.
not even showing it live. It just flashes on the bottom of the screen. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's talk about making it a 2-day event, but there's also, and this has been around for, I mean, I'm not joking when I say decades, there's also a push to make the draft happen after free agency instead of vice versa.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on both of those?
Yeah. Draft after free agency. I love, like,
Houston would certainly appreciate that.
yeah, especially right this kind of year. But yeah, I think then you could, for the very worst of the worst teams, you still should be drafting talent over fit. But a handful of the other teams, like if you're Orlando, for example, we've already filled out our roster, you could make a pick at 6. Whereas, what we really need right now is a shooter, or we need a backup center, or we need a development point guard. You could really make that kind of pick. If it is, we've already gone through, we filled out the rest of our roster, we know where we are. If it's after, and I just think you'd have a little bit more flexibility and movement potentially through stuff. The challenge is, I think, one thing that would get lost is you'd probably lose a lot of the trades, because a lot of the trades are made knowing, like, all right, you're going to have cap space in a week and the deal can't go official till then, but we'll make the deal and agree to it now and kind of go through that. So, but yeah, that one's been around. There's been a push on that for a number of years, but they haven't gotten there yet with changing the whole calendar structure, because it's really, the draft is the last thing. It's at option decisions and the like on the NBA calendar each league year.
Now, I would say that it could create some tricky situations in regards to summer league, though, because we have the draft, and then like 2 weeks later, summer league starts up, and you want these guys to be able. I mean, there's some guys where where summer league starts so close to the draft that some of these guys haven't signed their contracts yet when summer league starts, and then there's the question of, well, do they want to step on the floor even though they haven't put pen to paper and all of that.
Two things on that one, because that's a really good point by you. The current CBA, maybe even the one before, I can't remember which one it was, but currently they changed it to all the draft picks count as at the full scale amount, which is 120% of the scale amount. So what happens when a player's drafted? So Victor Wembanyama, we already know he's going to make like $11.9 million, because the full amount is like $11 million or whatever it is. Then that goes up to 109 million and change, I should say. That goes up to 120%, because you can sign any first round pick between 80 and 120%. What they did was to avoid teams who were going to have, so the Spurs, for example, we're going to have a ton of cap space. Let's say they wanted to use all that cap space. What they do is they let Wembanyama sit on the books at 100% of the scale amount, take that extra 2 million or so in cap space, use it, then sign him to the 120%, because you could always do that. So what they did was they changed it. The cap hold is now 120%. So that eliminated any reason for first rounders to wait, right? Like, they might as well, you're drafted, you already count for the same amount, sign and go. The other piece that comes into that is second rounders, though. That's still pretty regularly. Guys would wait because teams are like, well, we got to wait because we're going to use part of our exception maybe to sign them, or maybe some leftover cap space. Well, now with the new second round pick exception, the so-called Pelinka rule,
yep,
you can just sign those guys right away to a deal you might have used cap space for or whatever anyway, and you get moving in that direction. So I think those are two positive moves to make sure if a team, like Charlotte, I think they've got the 2 pick, but then I think they've got another later first. I think they have 2 or 3 seconds. If they wanted to bring 5 players onto the summer league roster in years past, it might have been a little bit more difficult. Now they should be able to do that without any real worry.
So the only real reason why then a player wouldn't sign that deal is if you were planning on using that player in a trade
Yep.
and you don't want to wait the 30 days after they sign that
Yep.
contract to put them into
Walker
the trade.
Kessler
Yeah,
last summer. Yeah,
right. That's
did it.
that's
I
what
don't.
that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, I don't know if he played at all, but or if he did, it was at the very tail end of summer league because he was going in the Gobert trade, and that had to wait until a little bit to be finalized and locked in. So, yeah,
Moving down the list here, does Detroit just rage trade the number 5 pick? Like they've got to be so disappointed. They got to be so disappointed right now. I mean, that's rough to drop that far, especially when with what's on the line. Potentially a generational talent, franchise changing guy, and you get the worst luck in the draft. That they'll be interesting to watch though in terms of what they do with that pick. Maybe they just keep it, but this is a team that had their sights set on moving up in the Eastern Conference this next season.
yeah. And the thing is, it sucks, right? And I can't even begin to spin it in a positive over
No.
like, oh man, it's really not that bad. The reality is though, for the Pistons, you got to be like super smart about what you do here. Like to your point, like, and I know you were joking, but like, yeah, you can't go overboard with like, well, that's it. I don't even want the pick
Yeah.
because the reality is, as you look into it, you get into a spot where it is, all right, you know what? We're here. Let's get into our, let's go into our, deal here where it is, all right, we're going to get, somebody's still pretty good here, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling up ESPN's mock now just to see. That is not the latest mock. Why do they still have the super old one up? I
I
can't
don't know
find
why
it.
they do a lot of the things they do, Keith.
That's a great point. Even better point by you.
But but your
Yeah, I
point
can't
is,
find it now, but yeah, it is. Oh,
there's
here it is.
somebody's
I
going to
got
be
it.
there.
Yeah, it is. As we get into it, they have them projected to get. Yeah, I thought it was going to be Jerace Walker out of Houston. I knew it was going to be one of the Thompsons, Walker, or Cam Whitmore. So you're still going to get a good player. You're going to get a wing now, probably. I know some people still think Thompson, Amen Thompson, maybe a point guard in the league. I think he's definitely going to be a 2-3 kind of guy. But we'll do a lot more breakdown on the draft guys. So you're going to get a good wing. That's fine, right? That was a need for you. You would have rather been in either the if you weren't going to get Wembanyama, you would have rather have come away with Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson because you could always say, all right, we'll take Henderson, we'll move Cade as a playmaking 3, and off we go. We'll get Miller, leave Cade at the 1, and just kind of move forward with that. So you still get a good player, but man, it's just brutal.
One of my favorite movies is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And Paul Rudd's character in that movie has this great line. His character is named Kunu, and they're out in the water getting ready to surf, and he's explaining his philosophy on life. And he says, when life gives you lemons, just say F the lemons and bail.
Yep.
And
I love that movie.
Detroit cannot do that. Detroit has to turn those lemons into lemonade. They have to try to make the best
Yep.
of this situation. And again, don't just rage trade this pick. Not that I would expect them to, but
No,
they need to try to make the best of it. Even though it certainly stings if you're the Detroit Pistons.
I do think they'll be interested in trading the pick. No, I think if if
For
you
sure.
could get something where it is, hey, give us a guy who can help us win right now and move along, there may be. So yeah, I mean, San Antonio's might as well already start selling Wembanyama jerseys and move on, and we could just start the draft at number 2. But man, over the next month and a half ish, roughly, until the draft comes, we're gonna get a lot of buzz of Charlotte's talking to X, about a pick, and Portland's had 20 offers for number 3 or whatever it is. Like it's gonna be absolutely crazy because just to repeat it because it's really worth one more time. Some of these teams are in such weird spots where it's like Portland kind of almost stumbled into this. I know they tanked at the end of the year to get down there, but they kind of almost fell there. Was not the plan, right? To be bad. And here we are, and now we go. And like Orlando, they've got 2 picks and a mostly full roster. Do you need 2 picks? What if you really like a guy at 4? Do you trade
put them
2
together
picks to move up and those kind of things? So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited for the next month of this. I have spent more time already watching these guys for this draft class than any draft class, I think, in years, because I knew literally nothing about a handful of these players. So I spent a lot of time. So I feel more prepared this year than I generally do going into a draft. So I'm kind of excited about that too.
Well, that makes one of us. So, that's a good thing that at least one of us is there. That's why we'll bring Sean in, because he really knows all these guys like inside and out.
Yeah.
But let's before we move on, because we have other topics we need to get to today. Is there any pick that is more of a lock to be traded than Dallas at 10?
No.
And boy, did their tanking efforts really pay off, because they did manage to keep that pick.
Yeah, and I think it was Zach Lowe's story. Both Zach Lowe and Jake Fisher both were in the room and wrote stories about like from being in the room. It's always one of the really fun reads from Zach's, because he's always got a bunch of like just fun little tidbits from the time in there. But both of them said versions of, there were a lot of people. I think it was Zach more than Jake, but there were a lot of executives that were like, "Boy, I hope Dallas doesn't get rewarded in this for what they did," because I mean, they already got fined $750,000. Could you imagine? If they had landed number one, Cuban would have been like, "You want to fine me 10 times that amount? Let's go!" Like I got I did, or as what does the guy say in Mighty Ducks? 2 minutes, well worth it.
Oh yeah, that's right. What did you do? Oh,
and then Kenny Wu, the third Bash brother, right? And then he gets
that's right.
penalty, and he says 2 minutes, well worth it. Great.
Oh,
movie.
that's right. I'm mixing. I was mixing Mighty Ducks 1 with Mighty Ducks 2 there.
Yeah,
yep, that happened.
Mighty Ducks 2 is the when they're playing Team Iceland.
That's right. The Team Iceland with what Gunnar Stahl.
Yep. And now, did you watch Mighty Ducks Game Changers on Disney Plus?
I did.
The coach of, I believe, somebody can tell me if I'm completely wrong on this. The coach of the Ducks that cuts the kid, right, which starts the whole like ragtag version of the new Ducks or whatever they are. He was in the movie playing on Team Iceland.
Was he?
Yeah.
I thought he looked. I didn't realize that. I thought he looked familiar. Yeah. That's funny.
I'm like 99% sure, but he's like a whole different like character. Like they don't like. I don't think he's playing the same guy. But yeah.
So. I was watching. What was it? It was obviously I'm on a tangent here, but this was Cobra Kai. I was watching Cobra Kai, and Wolf the Dentist Stanton pops up in it.
Oh, that's funny.
Like that, and I'm talking, the actor does. Yeah. He's not that character, but he pops up. It was one of those instant, I know that guy, and then I went, oh, that's who that is. That guy, I remember him. He was such a good villain.
I needed something on in the background yesterday while I was doing waiting for the lottery to come on, and I was doing other work. So I put on it was the Kingsman, the second one with the Golden Circle, I think it's called, or something like that. Yep. I forgot Pedro Pascal was in that. Like completely forgot that he's in that movie. And then I was like, hey, that's right. You were in this. Yeah. So,
All right. I suppose we should get back to talking about basketball at some point here.
In theory, that's what the show's about.
Right. So Dallas most certainly will move that pick. We'll have plenty of time to break down the rest of the draft. We do need to talk about this though. And this will have a big, have a lot to do with what Houston does at number 4, I think, but Harden, James Harden, officially declining his player option. Not a surprise. I mean, we knew this was going to happen, but just again, more buzz that he seeks basketball freedom to be himself. This doesn't necessarily sound like a guy who is eager to stay in one place here.
Yeah.
Well, he could still do whatever he wants. You never know. You never know. He might wind up staying in Philly, but it feels like every day we just get more and more like, he's leaving, kind of more fuel added to that fire.
Yeah, I don't even fully enter like basketball freedom to be myself. Like, do you want to shoot a lot? I'm not sure I fully get what that means. You want to play less defense? Like, you don't even want to cross half court. Like, you want to stay on just the one end of the floor. Vivek Ranadive is like, yes, let's go. Remember that when that was like his suggestion? When like he took over to play more 5-on-4 and leave one guy on the other end. Yep. So which is just wild. But anyway,
it's like the guy in the early days of MMA that fought the fight with one boxing glove on.
Right.
He's just trying bizarre stuff.
This is a show where Trevor and Keith put a topic up, and then they do everything but talk about that topic. um, I think with Harden, I think the reality is declining the player option. That was always going to happen, right? That was sorry. The dog is trying to push his way up through underneath the desk.
He's like, hey, if you
That
guys are
was
talking
always
about
going to
everything
happen,
else, I can
right?
get
I
in on
know
this too.
everything, but that's he was always declining the player option. We knew that from the minute he signed the deal with a player option on the second year. I think the interesting part was he says 4-year deal, that like that's what the report is. He wants a 4-year max contract. Again, not super surprising. What's funny is normally, right, those 4-year max deals become, or a max deal, I should just say, the big benefit for the incumbent team is they can give a player the 5th year. Because of the over 38 rule with Harden, Philadelphia functionally can't and still do a max deal with him. So what happens in that case is Harden is pretty limited to 4-year deal with them or with another team. And then it just becomes a difference between 5% and 8% raises. And that's not a huge amount. So for James Harden, if he wants to go somewhere else, he's just going to go some Houston, right? Let's be obvious about it. If he wants to go to Houston, he's not going to let the money be the difference between him and going to Houston, especially when it's not even going to be that much money.
Yeah, exactly. And then especially when you start factoring in taxes and things like that, which Houston's got some advantages there. So there's a lot to suggest that maybe he really does here wind up in Houston. But I look at this quote. I mean, and this is sources telling Chris Haynes. This is not a quote from James Harden, of course, but from Chris Haynes, Harden will only entertain suitors that present a competitive roster. Okay, so Houston's got some work to do there. Sure. And the basketball freedom for the star to be himself. It feels like a quote from Ryan Howard from The Office. Like I want a leader who will lead me.
Yeah.
When I'm in the mood to be led, right? Like that's what this comes across like. Yeah, I need a coach that is going to let me do whatever I want, but also give me a roster that can win right now. That's essentially what the message that's being presented there is. Let James Harden do whatever he wants out there on the floor, while you cash in all your chips in order to put a quality team around him.
Yeah. So and let me do whatever I want, but make sure the other 4 guys are really good at doing the things I don't want to do. Right. So we can still win every game we play.
We talked about
little
this
weird.
James Harden probably isn't worth it to do that for anymore.
No, not anymore. Yeah, he's not that level of player anymore. And he's never, quite frankly, been that level of player in the playoffs. When it's really mattered most, he's always kind of shrunk and fallen apart in those big games. And now, he was still very good in the regular season. I tend to believe, whether it's the Rockets or the Sixers, you sign him to a 4-year max deal. You're fine this year. You're probably fine year 2. Year 3 and year 4 are probably not going to be very good.
No.
Like you're just, that's the reality. That's why I would try to, we'll give you a 4-year max deal because that's probably what it's going to take. But that last year needs to be partially guaranteed or a team option, some control for us. So functionally, it's only a 3-year max contract, semi-similar to what the Suns did with Chris Paul there. And I don't know I think we have that on the list. So,
let's talk Chris Paul.
Yeah. So rumor is the Suns, I believe this was also from Chris Haynes. This is the time of year where everybody's kind of writing their notebook pieces, right? So we're getting all those coming out now. But the Suns are going to guarantee and pick up Chris Paul's contract for next year. $30.8 million is what he's owed. $15.8 million of it's guaranteed. So they could save roughly half if they did let him go with that. But it sounds like the Suns are saying, no, we're going to bring him in. That doesn't mean they're going to keep him, but it sounds like they are going to pick up and guarantee his deal. He also has a fairly early guarantee date that I will double check. Will you kind of give your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I think it makes sense in that the Suns aren't in a position to where they can just let a talented player walk away, even if it does save them 15 million plus whatever you want to talk in terms of luxury tax. They're trying to win right now. Like, that's not a good message to send to Kevin Durant, to Devin Booker, that, hey, we're just letting this salary slot, if nothing else, walk away. In addition to the fact that, Chris Paul is still a good player. He's obviously nowhere near what he was, and there's injury concerns and all of that. But what you do if you're the Suns is now you've got a $30 million expiring contract that you could use to make another move. You could turn him into 2 or 3 players, maybe. You could go after one big time player. Now, obviously, you've given up a lot of your other trade assets that you'd use to help, add something to that part of it. But still, that gives you a $30 million expiring contract to play with should things not really work out the way that you're hoping. Or who knows? We wrote off Chris Paul, what was it, 4 years ago when he went to
Yeah.
Oklahoma City? Something like
Yep.
that. And then he turned in a fantastic season. So I think this makes sense for Phoenix to not just take the savings and say, see you later. Instead, you keep open the door that, hey, maybe this can work with Chris Paul when we get a whole season together in training camp and all that kind of stuff, in addition to the other moves you're going to make to bring in depth. But then on top of that, it keeps the salary slot open to use in a trade, that $30 million expiring contract, should things not work out. That could be important for them sometime between, October and the trade deadline in February.
Yeah, I think that's a very big consideration here.
I guess maybe in
you
July.
want that there. Yeah, even into the next year. Yep. Too. Well, at that point, he'd go back to reverting to zero because his next year is fully non-guaranteed. But
I'm talking about this July. They pick up the option.
Yeah.
And
you pick it up now. And where it's at with Chris Paul, I thought he had an early guarantee date. I got him mixed up with another aging point guard. That's Mike Conley, who has June 24th. Chris Paul's is June 28th, so a couple days in advance of free agency opening. So my guess is, whether they actually guarantee his money early, or they just generally in these situations they say, yeah, we're going to guarantee him, and then they just don't waive him by the deadline, and that's how we get there. So, but yeah, it's I'm with you. You gotta maintain the salary slot if nothing else. Just position, because saving $15 million it's not gonna free up enough flexibility for them to do anything. You'd have to do that and dump DeAndre Ayton's salary, like entirely dump it with nothing coming back to be able to pull that off, and that's probably not happening either.
No, you're not doing that. All right, Ty Lue. There have been rumors linking him to the Milwaukee Bucks, that maybe they would try to find some way to pry him loose from the Clippers. And the word came out that no, Ty's going to stay with the Clippers, that maybe he'll do a new deal with them. Maybe they work on an extension or something, but sounds like there isn't the intention from the Clippers side of things to say, yeah, no problem, see you later, Ty. Instead, they're gonna do what they can to hang on to him.
Yeah, this one was, again, a few different places have had little pieces and parts of this story, but all it adds up to is Clippers are like, nope, we're not letting him go. And he's the most stable thing in the organization right now, right? Because you don't know when your players are going to be available, and kind of go from there. So yeah, it was very interesting. I meant to ask you. So I was asked this on a radio spot this week, was, do the Lakers and the Heat runs, right, as a 7th and 8th seed, like me in the regular season, doesn't really matter. And that was the question. I'm curious to see what you think, and then I'll tell you my thought on it.
Am I having deja vu? Didn't I ask you this like 2 days ago off of a radio show that asked me that?
Maybe.
Maybe it's a glitch in the matrix.
I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe we're cycling through it. So I'll just tell you the answer I gave was, if the Clippers had made the run from a low seed because they completely devalued the regular season, then I might feel that way. The Lakers certainly did not devalue the regular season. They were just bad. There's no other way to put it. They were a bad team that made trades
and then made huge changes,
got healthy, and became good, right? So like, they at no point did I feel like the Lakers were intentionally like saying, we don't care. We're gonna. I mean, everybody has a handful of games, right, where you do that, but
the Clippers take it to the extreme of, hey, just get our guys healthy for the postseason. That's all we care about. We don't care about regular season games. So that's not what the Lakers did. The Lakers held down the turbo button from February 10th on.
It's so funny. Maybe we did have this card. Now it does feel like it was maybe we're so connected now. We're like having the same dreams or something. I don't know.
That's what it is.
But the other point I made too is, I said, if you're the Clippers, you can't go in. I think next year we may see the Clippers. I'm not going to say they're going to go full bore, pedal to the metal from day one. I think we might see them kind of say, what does it look like if we actually play guys, and we actually do push, we try to win games, and we keep things moving. I think we have a chance of seeing that be how this plays out next year, because I think it's going to be, hey, for 1 year we got to find out, like, are we as good as we think we could be, and let's try to go. Obviously, you're not going to force guys to play through injuries, but I think it's going to be, I think we might get Kawhi plays 65, 70 games or something in that range
Mhm.
next year and doesn't, maybe sits out the back to backs, or, if he's feeling a little something, that's where they go. But there's going to be some differences coming with that team because you can't just run it
Can't
back
keep
and
doing
do the
this.
same thing and be the fifth or sixth seed and give yourself a really hard path, especially since you know what, they didn't guarantee you getting there healthy, right? That's the
Nope.
worst part of it. You then still had injuries at the end of the year that really sunk your season. So anyway,
All right. Last thing we've got is the word that there would be strong trade interest in Jonathan Kuminga should the Warriors decide to put him on the market. There was a story the other day about how Kuminga has already decided that he's going to go around to multiple cities over the summer with the plans of just tearing it up in the open runs in the hopes of catching the attention of teams that might want to trade for him because he's not super thrilled with the way the Warriors didn't utilize him this year. I know there were a lot of Warriors fans that were talking about during the Lakers series, like, why don't we put Kuminga in there? Like, he could
yep.
do this, this, and this. And they were upset that he wasn't getting minutes. Uh, First, what do you think about the Kuminga national tour here? And then, is that a move the Warriors should consider when we talk about they tried to do the two timelines thing, right? Build for the future and win right now. Do they have to pick one lane or the other? I have a feeling which one they would pick. And then does that result in a Jonathan Kuminga trade?
Yeah, my feeling on this, since the James Wiseman of it all washed out in Golden State, lean all in to trying to win one more, two more, whatever it is you think you can get out of this group. Go all in, trade the rest of the kids, really, do what you can to prop up the Curry, Clay, Draymond group. I'd re-sign Draymond. Don't get crazy, but give him a fair value contract and try to really try to get one more out of this group because Wiseman's gone. Kuminga has not shown enough to me that I feel like, all right, there's our bridge player. Jordan Poole, I don't know. I mean, we were both huge fans of Jordan Poole a year ago.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, God, he fell off the map. I'm
He,
starting to think Jordan Poole, I've said this a lot because a lot of people have been like, what happened to Jordan Poole? I just think he's not good coming off the bench. Coming off the bench is a skill. There's a reason guys like Jamal Crawford and Lou Williams carved out nearly 20-year careers as
mhm.
bench players. I firmly believe the Six Man of the Year award should be named the Crawford Williams Award after the two of them, right? And I think they basically was like traded it back and forth, it felt like, for years between the two
Mhm.
of them. But that's because it's a real skill, right? It's you have to be able to come right into games, make a positive impact, and really drive, good things for your team. I think Poole's the kind of guy who needs to be out there early, needs to feel his way into the game, get into the flow and go. And I think putting him in that full-time bench role, because he wasn't as good last year after Clay came back. Then this year really just fell off.
He's
So
yeah.
so
He was one of the Lakers' best players
yeah,
in
he
that
really
series.
was. He was
I
really
mean,
bad, yeah, through
he was
that
awful.
stretch.
He was
So I'm
awful
at a
for the
point
Warriors.
now where, yeah, I would look to move these guys. Coming out a nice year, he statistically, if you just looked, you're like, man, it's all exactly the same, right? Just just under 10 points per game, but adjust that for playing a few more minutes. But that misses, like, he did raise up to be a 37% three-point shooter on a little over 2 attempts per game. This year he shot 52.5% from the field. So there's a lot there. I just look at it as, this kid is he 21 yet? No, he's only 20. He turns 21 right before the start of next season. So you get to a point where it's like, by the time he's really, really ready to be a contributor to you winning, like the rest of the guys are going to be done. Like they're going to be
Mhm.
gone or barely hanging in there. Maybe Curry, because he may last, a while yet, just because, the way his
'Cause he
game
can
is.
shoot.
But yeah, man, I don't know. I would probably look to see what I could get for him. 6 million in salary matching, so that's not nothing, and that's the way for the Warriors. You're gonna have to make hard choices like that with the new penalties against them because they're gonna have the league minimum and sign their own draft pick. That's it. That's the how they can add outside talent unless they make trades. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get it, right? And I think you'd have a whole bunch of these teams look at it and saying, all right, yeah, we're ready to go. Like we think we can give him 30 minutes a game and find out what he can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if he can get interest from a lot of teams, I think.
Sure.
And if he can get the kind of return the Warriors want, this might be a win-win for both parties, for the Warriors and Kuminga, where he can get the minutes that he needs, and the Warriors can get the piece that they need to help them, win with their veteran players. So he'll be a name to keep an eye on, and we'll see what the footage looks like coming out of these open runs. If Kuminga really
Yeah, I
does
don't that I
just
don't know.
kick in,
I don't know about that whole plan. I think teams have a pretty good book on what he's going to be. I don't know that showing up and dominating me in an open run is going to make anybody feel real good about
hey,
trading for
come
him.
on. It worked for Jimmy Butler, right? Just get on a team with the third
Suppose.
stringers, dominate the first string guys, and get yourself traded. That
I
works.
think Philly might have had a sense of what Jimmy Butler was, but then again, maybe they didn't because then they were like, "Nah, you can go to Miami. It's okay."
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Let's see. I'm not going to say anything bad about Jimmy Butler. Not
No.
right now. Maybe a couple weeks I can say bad things about Jimmy Butler, but not today. Not today, my friend. I'm not walking into that danger zone.
Oh, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us on today's show. Make sure that you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Of course, the podcast feed over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Follow us there as well. Give us that 5-star rating and review. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.